Okay, Assalamualaikum. We are back with share-based payment topic, the final part of share-based payment topic. Okay, as you remember, for share-based payment, you have three types, right? Equity settle, cash settle, and also choice, either equity settle or cash settle. That is type. And in terms of transaction, you have two. You need to check either it's between the third party, which is not employees, or whether it is with employees. Okay, so we are now in part 4 looking into share-based payment, employees, transaction related to employees. Part 3, transaction related to employees also, tapi equity settle. Part 4, transaction related to employees but it relate to cash settle pula. Okay. So for cash settle share-based payment, the good or services acquired and the liability incurred is measured at the fair value of the liability. So in part 4, the only difference is it is a transaction with employees. But you should remember that kita dah pun tengok cash settle when we have third party transaction. So basically the accounting treatment for cash settle share-based payment sama ada dengan employees ataupun non-employees, basically it is the same. Where the cash settle share-based payment, we take into consideration liability and it is considered as the fair value of the liability. Until the liability is settled, the entity shall remeasure the fair value of liability at each reporting date and the settlement date. Okay. So kalau you nak revise balik, you boleh pergi kepada previous share-based payment topic, I think part 2 where we already discussed on cash settle. Cuma hari ni adalah cash settle with transaction related to employees. Okay. So cash settle transaction require recognition of liability where we going to measure at the fair value of the liability. The liability is remeasured at the fair value at the end of each year. This is where you need to kira every end of the year what is the fair value of the liability, and the change in fair value is recognized in your income statement. Okay, an example of cash settle share-based payment transaction is share appreciation right given to employees. In part 3 previously, at the end of the vesting period, dia akan dapat shares. But in part 4, dalam slide ni, kita tengok cash settle. Maknanya employees tu dia tak dapat shares, tapi apabila habis condition yang ditetapkan, dia akan dapat dalam bentuk duit. Tapi duit tu adalah disandarkan pada share price of the specified number of equity. So beza kan? Kalau equity settle dia dapat shares, dia jadi pemilik, dia jadi pemegang saham. But if you have cash settle at the end of the condition, katakanlah after 3 years service, dia akan dapat dalam bentuk cash. So if you look at example, okay, if you look at example 11, okay, this example, on 1st January 2004, BX Berhad, BX Berhad granted a compensation scheme of share appreciation rights. So it's executive directors. Okay. Term of condition, grant date 1st January 2004, equity instrument 100 million of PX shares, right of directors, right to receive cash based on the appreciation of the company's share price from the grant date up to the settlement date. Okay, vesting condition under company's employment as executive directors, maknanya siapa yang kerja dengan syarikat tu sebagai executive directors akan dapat share right to receive cash. Dia akan dapat duit cash bersamaan nilai dengan share appreciation. Okay, peningkatan saham tu beza berapa, dia akan dapat dalam bentuk tunai. Okay, so kalau macam ni dia akan bagi encouragement lah, motivation kepada executive directors to manage the company well. Okay, so dia ada juga vesting period 3 years from the grant date, which is midnight of 31st December, because grant date is 2004, so 2004 31 2004, 31 2005 dan 31 2006 you have complete 3 years. So settlement date will be 1st April. Maknanya apa maksud settlement date 1st April? Maksudnya dia bayar pengiraan dia, okay, condition dia until 2006, tapi dia bayar cash tu adalah pada 1 April 2007. Okay. So assume the fair value of the scheme is according to this. Okay, kalau kita tengok dia, kat sinilah kita perlu ambil kira. This is where a situation where we have a market condition. Ni yang bila case macam ni, barulah kita kena ambil shares yang diberi. The company has recognized the liability for the SARS as at 31st December based upon MFRS share-based payment. The amount of the liability was not revised as at 31st December 2005. Okay, require, assuming the year end is 31st December each year, show the effect of the change in the fair value of the scheme share for each of the year. So kita tahu bila dia cash kan, itu beza dia, sebab bila dia cash, turun naik saham tu menentukan banyak ataupun sikit duit yang kita dapat. Okay, so suggested solution for this, okay, sama juga kita akan in here we going is not equity sebab kita tak bagi equity kat sini, we put it in account payable. So sini memang change in fair value, kalau itu kita letak sebagai expenses. So 100 million shares time 2 at the end of 2004, dia punya share price is RM2. Bukan share price share appreciation, maksudnya peningkatan harga saham dia. Bukan sebab tu dia kosong bukan maksudnya harga saham dia kosong. Okay, because we are talking about share appreciation. Okay, so 31st December 2012, so 100 million times 2 times 1/3, again, vesting period there, 3 years. That's why we need a vesting period. So you get 67 million ringgit here. Okay, and then in 2005, okay, you going into charge similar process. Okay, cumanya yang bezanya kita punya nilai yang dia adalah mengikut market value. Okay, so we have also you kira 3/3, and since the settlement date is on 1st April, so 1st April pun kita akan kira juga berapakah share appreciation pada masa tersebut. So dia akan dapat lagi peningkatan sebanyak 100. Jadi total yang kita kena bayar adalah 800 million. Okay, total yang kita kena bayar adalah 800 million. So journal entry is similar to what you have previously. Okay, dia cash settle ni dia lebih kurang macam yang hari tu juga, cumanya it's soalan dia involving employees. Okay, and then beza dan cash settle employees dengan non-employees adalah you tengok untuk employees dia ada masa yang lebih panjang. Mungkin 2 tahun, 3 tahun. Kalau cash settle to third party transaction yang tak melibatkan employees, macam you beli barang ataupun pay for service, dia tak adalah sampai tahun. Maknanya awal tahun you enter into the transaction and then sekali you pun bayar. So dia tak adalah banyak sangat perubahan share price. Okay, so you can see the journal entry here. Okay, so that is how you have cash settle for your employees. Okay, okay. So for employees, we already complete. Now the next part is, okay, if you still remember, we already look at into equity settle. We already look at into equity settle. We already look at either third party transaction employees or non-employees. We already look at into cash settle for both type of transaction. Okay, now we have one more that we need to look into, that is choice of equity settle or cash settle. Okay, this is a situation where you enter into a similar agreement, cuma bezanya diberi pilihan sama ada nak ambil equity settle ataupun cash settle. Okay, kalau yang sebelum-sebelum ni dia dah tetapkan, okay, ni equity settle, ni yang ini cash settle. Tapi untuk yang ketiga ini adalah the supplier of goods and services or the entity receiving those goods or services may choose whether the entity settle in cash or by issuing equity instrument. So biasanya dalam soalan dia akan maklumlah kewujudan pilihan ni. Okay. So which party has the option? So in this case, kalau choice, what you need to do is you need to identify siapa yang diberi pilihan ataupun siapa yang boleh memilih. Okay, so sama ada the entity yang boleh pilih nak equity settle ataupun cash settle, ataupun counterparty has the option. Macam contoh, saya beli barang dengan you. Jadi saya entity, you adalah supplier contoh. So kita kena tengok who has the option, sama ada saya yang boleh pilih nak equity ataupun cash settle, ataupun you yang boleh pilih nak equity ataupun cash settle. You kena pasti dulu pilihan tu di tangan siapa. Okay, entity or counterparty, because pilihan di tangan siapa tu menentukan accounting treatment. Okay, if the entity has the option, then the existence of obligation to settle in cash, okay, then it will be cash settle. No obligation, then it will be equity settle. So ini adalah rules. Maknanya kalau ada benda yang you kena check lah nanti. So we going to go into detail. So bila kita masuk equity, the choice of equity settle, kita masuk untuk tengok kedua-duanya sama ada employees and also non-employees. Sebab kita belum discuss ni lagi sebelum. Sebelum ni kita belum discuss lagi. Okay. So we look in the first situation first, where the entity have the choice. Okay, the entity choose the settlement method. Where the entity choose the mode of settlement, it should determine if it has a present obligation to settle in cash and account for the transaction accordingly. Instance, when the entity in substance has an obligation to settle in cash are, contoh yang dalam situasi yang dia kena settle in cash. Satu, the choice of settlement in equity instrument has no commercial value. Okay, so entity is prohibited from issuing equity. The choice of settlement in equity instrument has no commercial value. Okay, or the entity has a past practice or stated policy to settle in cash. Mungkin dia dah enter into transaction yang lebih kurang sama, dan transaction yang sebelumnya dia memang guna cash settle. Then you kena guna cash lah. Okay, generally settle in cash when the counterparty requests for cash settlement. So kalau yang ni kita akan tengok dulu present obligation or not. Okay. When the entity has present obligation to settle in cash, the transaction is accounted for as cash settle transaction. Where the entity has no obligation to settle in cash, it may settle in equity. Then it will account for the transaction as an equity settle payment. Okay, so when you have this condition, satu you check siapa yang boleh pilih. Okay, katakanlah yang boleh pilih adalah entity, you kena check dia ada present obligation to settle in cash ataupun tidak. Kalau memang ada present obligation, then you need to settle in cash. Contoh dia dah tetapkan polisi, kena settle in cash, then dia tak boleh tukar lah. Ataupun and then kalau dia tak ada obligation to settle in cash, barulah you treat it as equity settle. Okay, on the other hand, when the counterparty has the choice. Okay, katakanlah diberi pilihan kepada supplier nak pilih yang mana, cash settle or equity settle. Then according to FAR570 require the determination of the liability element and the equity element. Choice with counterparty, entity has granted compound financial instrument. The liability component is the counterparty right to demand payment in cash. The equity component berangin kuat ni tutup tingkap. Okay, so equity component is the counterparty right to demand settlement in equity instrument. So in a situation where the counterparty has a choice, maknanya kita tunggu je kan dia nak pilih yang mana. Jadi bila dalam situation macam tu, kita kena set bagi dua lah, mungkin dia pilih nak cash, mungkin dia pilih nak equity. Jadi kita kena standby liability. Kalau dia demand for cash, kita kena standby dalam bentuk liability, sebab bila dalam bentuk liability ni dia akan jadi macam cash settle lah. Kita akan letak dalam account payable. If you have equity settle, then you simpan dalam share based payment reserve kan. So you kena ada dua-dua lah, standby untuk dua-dua, sebab kita tak tahu apakah pilihan supplier kita ataupun employees kita, the counterparty. Okay, but the liability and equity component must be reported separately. So it's like kita standby dua-dua lah. Mungkin dia pilih cash. Kalau cash, kita ada cash lah dalam liability account kita. Or dia pilih equity, kita ada juga standby equity dalam reserve kita. Okay, then you have the counterparty. So this is a condition when the counterparty has a choice. Okay, choice with counterparty and the counterparty is non-employee. So macam mana nak kira equity component? Adalah fair value of goods and services minus fair value of liability component. Okay, whereas for choice with counterparty, the counterparty is employee, then it will be fair value of equity alternative based on the fair value of instrument minus fair value of cash settle alternative. Okay, so you keep this formula. You can come and refer to this back when you look at the example. Okay, so this is the example. On 30th June 2007, BB Eberhard purchased a building for 5 million. The seller has agreed to accept payment for building either in cash or in shares. The seller can choose. Okay, so we have dengan siapa choice here adalah dengan counterparty, and then this counterparty is non-employees. The seller can choose either to receive 1.5 million shares of BBA Berhad to be issued in 6 months or to receive cash payment in 3 months' time equivalent to market value of 1.3 million shares. It is estimated that the share price will be 3 ringgit and 60 cent in the 3 months time and 4 ringgit in 6 months time. The price of BBA Berhad shares on 30th June 2007 was 3 ringgit. So kalau you tengok dalam soalan ni, nampak tak? Kita tak tahu lagi dia nak pilih yang mana, because dia ada dua pilihan, sama ada nak pilih shares yang berwarna biru tu ataupun dia nak pilih duit yang berwarna merah tu. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to take this into consideration by identifying the liability component and also kena pecahkan. Okay, liability component berapa? Sebab kita tak tahu kan, mungkin equity, mungkin liability. Okay, so kita pecahkan, kita tahu liability component dia. What is the fair value of goods and services tadi adalah 5 million, the price of the building. Okay, and then we have fair value of the liability component. Yang ni kita tahu because liability component adalah cash payment kan. So dia 1 ringgit and 3 million. 1.3 million multiply with fair value on the date you enter into the transaction, 3 ringgit. Okay, so daripada sini kita dapat equity component dia adalah 1.1 million. So kalau kita tengok daripada sini, equity component dia adalah liability component adalah 3.9 million and equity component dia adalah 1.1 million. Okay. You enter into the 30th June. Okay, so 30th June tu kita kena record macam ni lah. Maknanya debit building 5 million. Okay, nak kredit kat mana tu? So bila nak kredit kat mana tu, tu yang kita kena pecahkan kepada liability component dan juga kepada equity component berdasarkan pengiraan formula tadi. Okay, and then yang ni maksud initial recognition. And then when you make a settlement, okay, if sell, sebab kita tak tahu kan yang mana satu pilihan dia sehinggalah dia actually pilih. Okay. Katakanlah dia pilih cash alternative. Okay, cash alternative, dan bila you nak bayar, it will be pada tarikh cash payment 3 months. In 3 months. So, in 3 months, RM3.60 kan? Okay, so kalau dia ambil cash alternative, so kita kena bayar dia adalah 1.3 million darab dengan RM3.60. Okay, pada 3 bulan kan, 3 months. So, RM4.68 million bayar. So, liability yang kita record tadi, yang kita kredit dalam liability kita ni adalah 3.9. So, changes to profit and loss adalah beza nilai dia. Okay. And then, yang ni kita tutup lah. Sebab kita tak guna, kita tak utilize equity tadi. Okay. Kalau dia pilih equity, maka dia akan pilih 6 month kan. So, 6 month adalah bulan 12 lah. So, debit liability, kita akan bagi dia ordinary share capital 5 million. Okay, so we going to pay we going to pay the supplier ordinary share capital 5 million. Sebab apa 5 million? Sebab kita pakai formula untuk equity settle lah. Kalau equity settle kan kita bayar according to the fair value of the goods and services, which is harga building lah. So bila kita bayar, kita akan bagi dia shares lah. Shares harga building ni kan 5 million. So kita credit ordinary share 5 million, then debit liability, debit share based payment reserve ni sebab apa? Sebab kita tutup lah account dia. So kita dah tak berhutang dengan dia dalam bentuk tunai 3.9 dan debit reserve kita 1.1. Okay. So what we call choice ni dia gabungan antara equity settle dengan cash settle. Jadi bila you ada cash settle, you pergi rujuk balik notes untuk cash settle. Okay, bila you ada equity settle, you kena rujuk balik notes untuk equity settle. Sebab dia macam dua-dua, kemungkinan dua-dua tu ada dalam satu soalan. Tapi you kena tahulah contoh yang mana siapa memilih dan apa yang dipilih. So kalau yang ini katakanlah example 2 ni dia bagi pilihan, dia bagi you skema jawapan lah. Mungkin dalam soalan sebenar dia akan cakap seller tu pilih cash alternative. So kalau seller tu pilih cash alternative, yang ini you tak payah buat lah. Yang ini kalau dia memilih equity alternative. Okay, so again to recap on the choice. Okay, ini yang nombor 3 ni, choice of equity settle or cash settle. First thing that you need to identify is siapa yang pilih, entity ataupun counterparty. Okay, so kalau counterparty, you go through the process lah. Ada tak cash obligation? Okay, keperluan untuk dibayar cash. Kalau ada keperluan, then you go to guna cash settle. Kalau tak ada keperluan, no obligation, then you pakai equity settle yang you belajar previously lah. Kalau choice tu adalah pada counterparty, apa yang you perlu ingat adalah you kena split. Dua, liability component pun ada, equity component pun ada. Atas dasar apa? Sebab kita tak tahu. Kita belum bayar lagi dia. Kita tak tahu dia nak pilih yang mana. Mungkin dia akan tunggu yang mana satu dapat duit lebih banyak. Contoh, katakanlah cash. Dia nak guna cash masa tu. Ataupun dia tengok company kita maju, dia mungkin nak pegang saham. So, you do not know yet until you actually make the settlement of the transaction. Okay. So, kena perhalusi the process. Okay, so hopefully you try to understand this and look at the tutorial, the 2 tutorial questions that you need to submit. Okay, and then this is the requirement of disclosure related to share-based payment. So you may want to use this as a reference later on. Okay, so with that, thank you very much and all the best.